Admiral Jake Morrison walked across the bridge of the U.E.S. Titan's Wrath and looked out at the stars. The massive ship was humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Its guns could destroy small moons, and its armor could stop almost any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. Jake had commanded ships for 20 years, but this one still made him feel proud every time he stepped onto the bridge. The bridge was quiet that morning. Most of the crew was running routine checks and maintenance. Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat at her station reviewing tactical reports from the outer colonies. Commander Ryan Phillips was in his lab studying samples from the latest alien contact mission. Everything was normal and peaceful, just the way Jake liked it. Then the communication system made a sound that changed everything. It was a weak signal coming from somewhere far away in space. The signal was so faint that the computer almost missed it completely. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, at the communications station, frowned and adjusted her equipment. "Admiral, I'm picking up." "Something strange," Sarah said. "It's a transmission, but it's not from any human ship or station." Jake walked over to Sarah's station. The signal was definitely alien. It was speaking in Galactic Standard, the common language that most spacefaring species used to talk to each other. But whoever was speaking sounded desperate and afraid. The voice was unlike anything Jake had heard before. It had a watery quality, like someone speaking underwater. Jake knew that voice belonged to a Catherian, one of the proud aquatic aliens who lived in the far reaches of the galaxy. The Catherians had always looked down on humans, calling them primitive and violent. "Human fleet, if you can hear this transmission, please respond," the alien voice said. The words were broken and hard to understand. "This is Ambassador Zephy High of the Catherian Republic. Our worlds are under attack. Our defenses are failing. We formally request military assistance from the Terran Federation." Jake felt his blood turn cold. The Catherians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of humanity's. Their ships were works of art that could dance through space like living creatures. If something was threatening them, it had to be incredibly dangerous. "The Void Swarm has come," the voice continued. "They have consumed half our worlds already. Our people are dying. Please, if there is any mercy in your species, help us. These are the coordinates to our last major stronghold." The transmission ended with a burst of static. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at each other with wide eyes. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. The Void Swarm was something that every species in the galaxy feared. They were like a living nightmare that consumed everything in their path. "Captain Rodriguez, pull up everything we have on the Void Swarm," Jake ordered. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the tension underneath. Lisa's fingers flew across her control panel. Data filled the main screen. The Void Swarm was a foam. Collective intelligence made up of billions of biomechanical creatures. They traveled from system to system, consuming all organic matter and converting it into more of themselves. No one knew where they came from or how to stop them permanently. "Sir, according to our records, the swarm hasn't been active for over 200 years, Lisa reported. "The last time they appeared, it took a combined fleet from 12 different species to drive them back into deep space." Commander Phillips joined them on the bridge. His face was pale and worried. "Admiral, I've been studying swarm biology for years. If they're active again and targeting the Catherians, we're looking at a potential extinction event. The swarm doesn't just kill, they consume everything. Planets, ships, entire civilizations disappear." Jake nodded grimly. He had read the reports. The Void Swarm was like a cosmic plague that spread from world to world. They turned living beings into raw material for their hive mind. Entire star systems had been found empty, picked clean of all life. "What's our response time to Catherian space?" Jake asked. 3 weeks at maximum burn with our fastest ships, Lisa answered. But sir, we'd be taking a huge risk. The quantum drives haven't been tested for that kind of extended use. Jake thought. For a moment. The Cytherians had never shown humans any respect. They had called humanity a young and barbaric species. They had refused trade agreements and military alliances. Some Cytherian diplomats had even suggested that humans were too violent to be trusted with advanced technology. But none of that mattered now. People were dying, and if the void swarm wasn't stopped, they would keep spreading until they reached human space. Jake had sworn an oath to protect humanity and its allies. Today, that oath would include former enemies who had nowhere else to turn. Send a message to Earth Command, Jake ordered. Tell them we need every available ship for immediate deployment. Authorization code Alpha 77. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she sent the message. Alpha 77 was the code for a galaxy-wide threat. It hadn't been used since the last major war 50 years ago. Within an hour, responses started coming in from across human space. Ship captains confirmed their readiness to deploy. Marine commanders reported their troops were prepared for immediate departure. Supply officers began calculating the massive amount of resources needed for such a large operation. Admiral Betty Cross from the lunar shipyards sent a personal message. Jake, you've got everything we can spare. 250 capital ships, 400 destroyers, and 150 support vessels. That's 850 ships total with 12 million personnel. Jake stared at the numbers on his screen. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Ships from every major human world were converging on the staging area near Mars. The sight would have been impressive under normal circumstances, but Jake knew they might not be enough. Sir, incoming message from Earth government, Sarah announced. President Helen Martinez appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but determined. Admiral Morrison, you have full authorization to deploy as you see fit. The cabinet has approved unlimited military spending for this operation. Bring our people home safely. Thank you, Madam President, Jake replied. We won't let you down. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity. Ships arrived from across the solar system and beyond. The space around Mars filled with human warships of every size and type. Massive dreadnoughts floated alongside small patrol boats. Transport ships carried supplies and ammunition. Medical ships prepared for casualties. Jake stood on his bridge and watched the greatest military force in human history assemble before his eyes. The sight filled him with pride and terror in equal measure. These ships represented the best that humanity could offer, but he wondered if it would be enough against an enemy that had consumed civilizations for millions of years. Admiral, all ships report ready for departure, Lisa announced. Jake took a deep breath. Once they entered hyperspace, there would be no turning back. They were committed to a fight that could determine the fate of 2 species and possibly the entire galaxy. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. He broadcast to the entire fleet. Today we go to war against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. The species that once called us primitive and violent now depends on us for survival. We will show them what humans can do when we fight for something bigger than ourselves. He paused and looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were young and old, experienced veterans and fresh recruits. All of them were ready to risk everything for people they had never met. Engage hyperspace drives, Jake ordered. All ships follow the Titan's wrath to Cytherian space. The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The 3 weeks in hyperspace felt like 3 years to Admiral Jake Morrison. Every day brought new reports from the Cytherian systems, and each report was worse than the last. Entire worlds had gone silent. Ancient cities that had stood for thousands of years were now empty ruins. The proud Cytherian civilization was being devoured piece by piece. Dr. Amanda Collins spent every waking hour studying everything humanity knew about the Void Swarm. She was the fleet's leading expert on alien biology, and her research would be crucial to their survival. Amanda had gray hair and tired eyes, but her mind was still sharp as a blade. She had spent her whole career studying dangerous alien life forms, but nothing had prepared her for this. The swarm operates like a living computer, Amanda explained to the senior staff during one of their daily briefings. Each individual creature is connected to a central intelligence through quantum entanglement. They share memories, experiences, and tactical knowledge instantly across vast distances. Captain Steve Murphy leaned forward in his chair. He commanded the Marine assault ship UES Leviathan and was responsible for ground operations. Steve was a big man with scars on his face from a dozen different battles. He had fought alien pirates, rebel colonists, and hostile wildlife on frontier worlds. "How do we fight something like that, Doc?" Steve asked. "Sounds like every time we kill one of them, the rest learn how we did it." Amanda nodded grimly. "That's exactly right. Traditional military tactics are almost useless against them. The swarm adapts to new threats within hours. That's why they've been so successful against other species." But Amanda had discovered something interesting in her research. Humans had fought similar enemies before, not in space, but on Earth. Swarms of locusts that could destroy entire crop harvests, diseases that spread through populations like wildfire, invasive species that threatened entire ecosystems. Humanity had learned to fight collective threats through trial and error over thousands of years. "The key is unpredictability," Amanda continued. "Every other species in the galaxy fights the same way. Long-range energy weapons, careful formations, predictable tactics. The swarm has learned to counter all of that, but humans fight differently." She brought up historical data on human conflicts. Battle after battle showed the same pattern. When faced with a superior enemy, humans didn't retreat or surrender. They adapted, improvised, and found new ways to fight. They used terrain, weather, psychology, and pure determination to win against impossible odds. Captain Alex Turner joined the conversation through video linked from his destroyer squadron. Alex was young but brilliant, known for his unconventional tactics and fearless leadership. His ships were fast and agile, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. "I've been thinking about this too," Alex said. "What if we don't fight them the way they expect? What if we use tactics they've never seen before?" Steve Murphy grinned. "I like where this is going. What did you have in mind?" Over the next several days, the human commanders developed a completely new approach to fighting the Void Swarm. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire, they would close to point-blank range and fight hand-to-hand if necessary. Instead of protecting their ships, they would use them as weapons themselves. Colonel Nina Brooks was put in charge of developing boarding tactics. Nina was small but incredibly tough, with short black hair and fierce green eyes. She had led commando, raids on pirate bases and terrorist hideouts. The idea of boarding enemy ships while they were still moving in combat didn't scare her at all. "We'll use modified drop pods," Nina explained to her Marine officers. "Launch directly from our ships into their biohulls while both fleets are engaged. The swarm won't expect us to board them during active combat." Her second-in-command, Major Carlos Vega, looked worried. "Ma'am, that's incredibly dangerous. We'll be launching into the middle of a space battle with no cover and no support." Nina smiled coldly. "That's exactly why it will work. The swarm has never fought an enemy crazy enough to try it." Dr. Marcus Webb made another crucial discovery during the hyperspace journey. Marcus was the fleet's chief scientist, a thin man with wild hair who rarely slept. He had been analyzing swarm biosamples collected from previous encounters, looking for weaknesses. "I found something incredible," Marcus announced during a late-night briefing. The swarm's quantum communication network operates on frequencies that human brains can detect. Not consciously, but on a subconscious level. Admiral Morrison looked skeptical. "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means humans might be able to sense swarm intentions before they act," Marcus explained. "Our brains evolved to detect threats and patterns. The electrical activity in human neural tissue can actually interfere with swarm quantum signals under the right conditions." This was potentially game-changing information. If humans could somehow disrupt the swarm's coordination, they might be able to create confusion and disorder in swarm formations. Marcus began working with the medical team to develop techniques for enhancing this natural ability. Meanwhile, the journey continued. Reports from Cytherian space grew more desperate each day. Ambassador SciFi sent periodic updates when he could, but his transmissions were becoming weaker and less frequent. The Cytherian defense fleet was down to fewer than 200 ships. From an original force of over 2,000, Commander Kate Sullivan monitored all communications from her station on the bridge. Kate was responsible for coordinating between different ships in the fleet and maintaining contact with Earth. She had listened to hundreds of distress calls over the years, but the Cytherian messages were different. They carried a level of despair that chilled her to the bone. "Admiral, incoming message from Ambassador SciFi," Kate announced one morning during the final week of their journey. The alien's image appeared on the main screen. SciFi looked terrible. His normally bright blue skin had turned pale gray, and his large eyes showed exhaustion and fear. Behind him, other Cytherians worked frantically at damaged control stations. "Admiral Morrison, I must inform you that we have lost 17 more worlds since our last communication," SciFi said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The swarm is adapting to our defenses faster than we can modify them. Our scientists estimate that we have perhaps 1 week before our last stronghold falls." The Cytherian ambassador paused and seemed to struggle with his next words. "I must also tell you that many of my people question whether humans can succeed where we have failed. They remember the conflicts between our species and wonder if you will simply watch us die." Jake Morrison felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "Ambassador, humans don't abandon allies, even former enemies. We're coming to fight, not to watch." "I believe you, Admiral," SciFi replied. "But you must understand the scale of what you face. The swarm has consumed billions of our people. Their bioships outnumber your fleet by thousands to 1. They have converted entire planets into breeding facilities for new warriors." The transmission flickered and filled with static. "We are under attack again," SciFi said urgently. "I must go. Please hurry, Admiral, for all our sakes." The screen went dark. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake looked around at his crew and saw determination mixed with fear on every face. They all understood now what they were flying toward. "How much longer until we reach Cytherian?" "Space?" Jake asked. 4 days, 6 hours at current speed," Lisa Rodriguez replied. Jake nodded. 4 days to prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. 4 days to finalize plans that had never been tested in combat. 4 days to ready themselves for an enemy that had destroyed species far more advanced than humanity. But Jake felt something that surprised him. Despite the odds, despite the fear, he felt confident. Human history was full of impossible victories and last-minute saves. Humans had a talent for winning fights, they had no business surviving. They were about to find out if that talent worked on a galactic scale. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he broadcast to the fleet. "We're 4 days out from the biggest fight in human history. I want every weapon checked, every system tested, and every Marine ready for combat. When we arrive, we're going to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do." Across the fleet, millions of humans prepared for war. They cleaned their weapons, said their prayers, and wrote letters to loved ones back home. They knew that many of them would not survive the coming battle, but they also knew that failure was not an option. The Void Swarm had to be stopped, and humanity was the galaxy's last hope. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Catherian territory, Admiral Jake Morrison saw a scene that would haunt his dreams forever. Space was filled with debris from destroyed ships and the scattered remains of what had once been proud Catherian colonies. 17 worlds showed no signs of life, their surfaces stripped bare and converted into twisted biological structures that pulsed with alien energy. The surviving Catherian fleet limped toward the human ships, like wounded animals seeking shelter. Ambassador Zephyr's flagship, the Deep Current, had holes in its elegant hull that vented atmosphere into space. The beautiful biomechanical design that had once made Catherian ships the envy of the galaxy was now scarred and broken. "Admiral, the Catherians are requesting permission to dock with our medical ships," Commander Kate Sullivan reported from her communications station. "Granted," Jake replied immediately. "Get their wounded to our hospitals and their command staff. To the briefing room. We need to know exactly what we're facing." Within an hour, Ambassador Zephyr stood in the briefing room aboard the Titan's Wrath. The proud alien diplomat who had once dismissed humans as barbaric now looked at them with desperate hope. His normally bright blue skin was pale and marked, with stress patterns that Dr. Amanda Collins recognized as signs of extreme trauma. "Admiral Morrison, I must thank you for coming," Zephyr said. His voice carried the watery quality common to his species, but now it also trembled with emotion. "When we sent that transmission, many of my people believed no one would answer. We're here now," Jake replied simply. "Tell us everything you know about the swarm's current tactics and strength." Zephyr activated a holographic display that showed the local star systems. Red markers indicated worlds that had been consumed, while yellow markers showed planets under attack. Only 3 green markers remained, representing the last free Catherian worlds. "The swarm has grown beyond our worst projections," Zephyr explained. "They have converted the biomass from 17 worlds into new warriors. Our intelligence estimates put their current fleet strength at over 50,000 bioships of various sizes." Captain Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her tactical display. 50,000 ships? We're outnumbered almost 60 to 1. And numbers are worse than that, Zephyr continued. Each bioship can split into smaller units during combat. A single large vessel might become dozens of smaller attackers. They coordinate perfectly through their hive mind, making them almost impossible to outmaneuver. Dr. Amanda Collins leaned forward. "Ambassador, in your battles with them, have you noticed any patterns in their behavior? Any weaknesses we might exploit?" Zephyr's large eyes showed a flicker of something that might have been embarrassment. "Dr. Collins, I must confess that we have fought them using traditional galactic warfare doctrine. Long-range energy exchanges, careful positioning, coordinated fleet movements. The swarm has adapted to counter all of our tactics." "What about boarding actions?" Colonel Nina Brooks asked. "Have you tried taking the fight inside their ships?" The Catherian ambassador looked shocked. "Colonel, that would be suicide. Bioships are living creatures. Their interiors are hostile environments filled with acid, poison gases, and immune system responses. No sane being would attempt to board them during combat." Nina smiled grimly. "Ambassador, you might be surprised what humans consider sane. The first test of human tactics came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a swarm scouting force approaching the mining world of Kithros Prime, one of the last inhabited Kitherian colonies. The enemy force consisted of approximately 300 bioships of various sizes, moving in the flowing organic formations that had proven so effective against traditional galactic fleets. "This is our chance to test our new approach, Admiral," Morrison announced to his fleet commanders. "Captain Turner, take your destroyer squadron and show these things what human tactics look like." Captain Alex Turner acknowledged the order from the bridge of his ship, the UES Raptor. Alex was young for a ship commander, only 32 years old, but he had earned his position through brilliance and courage. His destroyer squadron consisted of 24 fast, agile ships designed for hit-and-run attacks. "All ships, this is Turner," Alex broadcast to his squadron. "We're going to do something that every military academy in the galaxy would call insane. We're going to charge straight into their formation and fight at point-blank range." Traditional space combat doctrine emphasized maintaining distance and using long-range weapons to wear down the enemy while avoiding damage to your own ships. Human doctrine, developed during their 3-week journey, threw all of that out the airlock. The destroyer squadron accelerated toward the swarm formation at maximum speed. The bioships responded predictably, spreading out to create overlapping fields of fire and preparing to engage at long range. They had fought this same battle hundreds of times against dozens of different species, but humans didn't slow down or spread out. They stayed in tight formation and kept accelerating. When the swarm ships opened fire with their biological weapons, the human destroyers used their superior maneuverability to weave between the attacks while closing distance rapidly. Now, Alex ordered when his ships reached optimal range. Human destroyers didn't just return fire. They launched kinetic projectiles at close range while simultaneously activating their ramming armor and collision fields. Instead of trying to avoid enemy ships, they deliberately crashed into them at high speed while detonating nuclear charges at the moment of impact. The effect was devastating. Bioships that had evolved to handle energy weapons and long-range combat were completely unprepared for physical impact attacks. Human ships tore through their formations like bullets through paper, leaving trails of destroyed alien vessels in their wake. But the real shock came when Colonel Nina Brooks launched her boarding operation. As Alex Turner's destroyers engaged the main swarm force, Nina's dropships launched directly from the assault carrier UE's Leviathan into the chaos of the battle zone. "Remember, we're not trying to capture these ships," Nina told her Marines over the communication system. "We're going inside to destroy them from within, plant the charges, and get out." The dropships were small, fast vehicles designed to carry 12 Marines each. They looked like metal bullets with engines attached. Nina had modified them with extra armor and biological protection systems, but they were still incredibly vulnerable in open space. The first wave of dropships punched through the hulls of the Gaio ships while both fleets were still engaged in combat. The swarm had never encountered an enemy that would attempt boarding operations during active battle. Their defensive responses were designed to handle external threats, not internal ones. Sergeant Maria Santos led the first boarding team into a medium-sized bioship. Maria was a demolitions expert with 10 years of experience fighting in hostile environments. She had blown up pirate bases, terrorist hideouts, and enemy fortifications on a dozen different worlds. The interior of the bioship was like stepping into a nightmare. The walls were made of living tissue that pulsed with alien blood vessels. The air was thick with spores and chemical irritants designed to kill or disable intruders. Acidic secretions dripped from the ceiling, and the floor moved like living skin. "This place is definitely not designed for visitors," Maria reported to her team. "Watch out for the immune system responses. Those white blob things are probably antibodies. The Marine squad moved through the bioship's corridors, fighting both the ship's defensive systems and small swarm creatures that tried to stop them. Their goal was the ship's central nervous system, located near what would be the bridge on a normal vessel. Dr. Marcus Webb had provided crucial intelligence about bioship anatomy. The central nervous system was the key to the ship's functions and its connection to the swarm hive mind. Destroying it would not only kill the ship, but also disrupt communications with nearby vessels. "Found it," announced Corporal Jake Williams, the team's technical specialist. "The main neural cluster is behind this membrane wall." Maria planted shaped charges around the neural cluster while her team held off increasing numbers of swarm defenders. The creatures were unlike anything in human databases. Part machine, part living organism, all teeth and claws and killing. "Intent. Charges set," Maria reported. "All teams prepare for extraction." The explosion that followed could be seen from the human fleet. The bioship convulsed like a dying animal before breaking apart in a shower of organic debris. Similar explosions marked the success of other boarding teams throughout the battle zone, but the most significant discovery came from Dr. Marcus Webb's monitoring equipment aboard the Titan's Wrath. As human Marines destroyed bioship neural clusters, the remaining swarm vessels began showing signs of confusion and disorganization. "Admiral, you need to see this," Marcus announced excitedly. "The destruction of individual bioships is causing network disruptions across the entire enemy force. Their hive mind is having trouble processing the simultaneous loss of multiple nodes." Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The swarm formation, which had been moving with perfect coordination moments before, was now breaking apart into confused clusters. Ships collided with each other or fired on empty space. A victory at Kithros Prime gave the human fleet valuable intelligence about the Void Swarm, but it also revealed something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Dr. Amanda Collins spent 3 days analyzing biosamples recovered from destroyed swarm vessels, and what she found made her call an emergency meeting with Admiral Morrison and his senior staff. "The bioships we destroyed weren't just random scouts," Amanda announced to the assembled officers. "They were gathering biological data from the Catherian worlds. Every planet they consumed, every species they devoured, was being cataloged and analyzed for a specific purpose." Captain Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her tactical displays. "What kind of purpose, Doctor?" Amanda activated the holographic projector in the center of the briefing room. The image showed a cross-section of swarm biotissue, but this sample was different from anything they had seen before. Instead of the simple cellular structure of warrior drones, this tissue showed complex patterns that resembled electronic circuits. "They're building something," Amanda said grimly. "The swarm isn't just consuming civilizations randomly. They're collecting genetic material, technological knowledge, and cultural information from every species they encounter. All of that data is being transmitted to a central location." Admiral Morrison felt his blood turn cold. Where is this central location? "Based on the quantum signal analysis that Dr. Webb performed, we believe it's somewhere in the galactic core region," Amanda replied. "The signals are too strong and too focused to be coming from a mobile fleet. This is something massive and stationary." Dr. Marcus Webb joined the briefing through video link from his laboratory. His hair was even wilder than usual, and his eyes showed the strain of working without sleep for the past 72 hours. "Admiral, I've been tracking the quantum communication patterns from captured swarm biomatter," Marcus said. "The signals aren't just coordinating current operations. They're transmitting massive amounts of data to a central processing hub. We're talking about the genetic codes of entire species, complete technological databases, and detailed psychological profiles of every civilization the swarm has encountered. The implications were staggering. The Void Swarm wasn't just a mindless plague that consumed everything in its path. It was a cosmic intelligence that was learning from every species it destroyed, growing stronger and more sophisticated with each victory. There's more, Amanda continued. The biosamples show evidence of directed evolution. The swarm is using the genetic material they've collected to create new types of warriors. Each generation is more advanced than the last, incorporating the best features of every species they've consumed. Commander Ryan Phillips, who had been studying alien cultures for most of his career, looked sick. They're not just killing civilizations. They're absorbing them. Every extinct species becomes part of the swarm's collective knowledge. Admiral Morrison stood up and walked to the viewing port. Outside, the human fleet was preparing for the next phase of their campaign. 800 ships and 12 million people, all depending on his decisions. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. "We need to find this central hub and destroy it," Jake said finally. "If the swarm is building something with the knowledge of dozens of extinct civilizations, we can't let them finish." Captain Jason Miller had been listening quietly from his position near the back of the room. Jason commanded the stealth reconnaissance, Vessel UES Shadow, and his job was gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes and a reputation for completing impossible missions. "Admiral, I volunteer to scout ahead and locate this central hub," Jason said. "The Shadow is equipped with the most advanced stealth technology in the fleet. We can get close enough to gather detailed intelligence without being detected." "Absolutely not," Jake replied immediately. "It's too dangerous. If the swarm captures you, they'll learn everything about human technology and tactics." "Sir, with respect, that's exactly why I need to go," Jason argued. "If this central hub is as important as Dr. Collins believes, we need to know what we're up against before we commit the entire fleet. One stealth ship is worth the risk." The debate continued for another hour, but Jake knew that Jason was right. They needed intelligence, and the Shadow was their best tool for gathering it safely. Finally, he gave his approval for the reconnaissance mission, but with strict parameters and a tight timeline. 2 days later, the UE Shadow slipped away from the main fleet and headed toward the galactic core. Jason Miller and his crew of 30 specialists were among the best in the human fleet, trained for operations in hostile territory. Their ship was equipped with advanced sensors, quantum stealth fields, and enough firepower to fight their way. Out of most situations, the journey to the galactic core took 8 days. As they traveled deeper into swarm territory, the Shadow sensors detected increasingly disturbing signs of the enemy's presence. Entire star systems had been stripped of all organic matter. Planets had been dismantled and converted into massive biological structures that pulsed with alien energy. "Captain, you need to see this," announced Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the Shadow's sensor operator. "I'm picking up something massive on long-range scanners. It's unlike anything in our databases." Jason moved to the sensor station and looked at the readings. What he saw made his hands shake. The object was the size of a small moon, but it wasn't made of rock or metal. It was a living structure, a biomechanical construct that dwarfed anything humanity had ever imagined. "My God," whispered Chief Engineer Paul Rodriguez. "That thing is bigger than Earth's moon. How is something like that even possible?" The massive bioconstruct was surrounded by thousands of swarm vessels of every size and type. But these weren't the warrior drones they had fought at Kithros Prime. These ships were different, more sophisticated, showing design elements from dozens of extinct civilizations. "They're not just building ships," Jason realized with growing horror. "They're building a superorganism. That thing isn't just a space station or a weapon. It's a living creature that incorporates the knowledge and capabilities of every species the swarm has ever consumed." The Shadow's passive sensors detected energy readings that defied human understanding. The bioconstruct was processing information at rates that exceeded the computational power of entire human colonies. It was analyzing genetic codes, technological specifications, and cultural patterns from thousands of extinct civilizations. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups inside the construct," reported Lieutenant Commander Kelly Wong, the ship's science officer. "Whatever that thing is doing, it's approaching some kind of completion phase." Jason made the decision to get closer, despite the obvious risks. The shadow crept through the outer edges of the swarm fleet, using its stealth technology to avoid detection. The closer they got to the bioconstruct, the more horrifying details became visible. The surface of the massive organism was covered with what looked like cities, but these weren't built structures. They were grown formations that incorporated architectural styles from dozens of different species. Human buildings stood next to Catherian biodomes and structures that belonged to civilizations that had been extinct for thousands of years. "It's not just learning about the species it consumes," Jason whispered. "It's recreating them. That thing is a living museum of every civilization the swarm has destroyed." But the worst discovery came when they detected energy signatures from inside the construct. The bioorganism wasn't just storing information about extinct species. It was using that information to create new forms of life, hybrid creatures that combined the best features of every race the swarm had encountered. "We need to get this information back to the fleet immediately," Jason announced. "Whatever that thing is building, we can't let it finish." The shadow began its withdrawal from the area, but their luck ran out just as they reached the edge of the swarm perimeter. A patrol of bioships detected their quantum signature and raised an alarm. Within minutes, hundreds of enemy vessels were converging on their position. "All power to engines," Jason ordered. "We need to reach the hyperspace jump point before they cut us off." The shadow raced through space with the entire swarm fleet in pursuit. Enemy bioships fired streams of acid and living projectiles that could eat through armor plating. The human stealth ship dodged and weaved through the attacks, but it was clear they wouldn't escape without a fight. "Captain, hyperspace jump in 30 seconds, announced the navigation officer. 20 seconds to weapons range for the lead pursuers, added the tactical officer. Jason watched the countdown timers and made a split-second decision. Instead of continuing to run, he ordered the shadow to turn and face their pursuers. The small human ship opened fire with everything it had, targeting the lead bioships with nuclear, torpedoes, and quantum destabilizers. The attack caught the swarm vessels by surprise. They had expected the human ship to continue fleeing, not turn and fight against impossible odds. 3 bioships were destroyed before they could react, buying the shadow the few seconds it needed to complete its hyperspace jump. Jump initiated. The navigation officer reported, "We're clear." As the shadow raced back toward the human fleet, Jason composed his report for Admiral Morrison. "Also, Terry, when the UE's shadow returned from its reconnaissance mission, Captain Jason Miller brought intelligence that changed everything. The bioconstruct in the galactic core wasn't just a massive enemy base. It was a living computer that had absorbed the knowledge of every civilization the Void Swarm had ever consumed." Admiral Jake Morrison called an emergency meeting of all senior officers to discuss their response. "The construct is preparing to birth a new generation of swarm vessels," Jason reported to the assembled commanders. "But these won't be like the bioships we've fought before. They'll incorporate technology and tactics from thousands of extinct species. If we let them launch, they'll be unstoppable." Dr. Amanda Collins had spent the past week analyzing the data from Jason's mission. Her findings were both encouraging and terrifying. The good news is that the bioconstruct is still vulnerable during its current phase. The bad news is that we have perhaps days before it completes its transformation. What exactly are we looking at in terms of defenses? Asked Captain Alex Turner from his destroyer squadron. Jason activated the holographic display, showing the massive bioconstruct surrounded by its protective fleet. Approximately 20,000 bioships of various sizes, including some that are larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. The construct itself is defended by biological weapon systems that can target anything within 1,000,000 kilometers. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical display with grim determination. 20,000 enemy ships against their force of 800 vessels. The odds were even worse than their first engagement, but the stakes were infinitely higher. We can't fight them using conventional tactics, Jake announced. Even with our new boarding strategies, we don't have enough ships or marines to handle that many enemies. We need something completely different. Dr. Marcus Webb had been working on a radical solution ever since Jason returned with the intelligence. Data. Marcus looked exhausted, but excited as he presented his plan to the senior staff. What if we don't try to destroy the fleet at all? Marcus asked. What if we target the bioconstruct itself with a coordinated infection attack? He activated a secondary display showing Earth's most aggressive bacterial strains. I've been developing weaponized microorganisms based on terrestrial bacteria. These aren't just biological weapons. They're designed to rewrite alien DNA in real time. The concept was brilliant and horrifying in equal measure. Instead of fighting the swarm's superior numbers, humanity would use biology against biology. They would infect the massive bioconstruct with engineered diseases that would turn its own systems against itself. The microorganisms are designed to target the quantum communication networks that connect all swarm organisms, Marcus explained. Once they penetrate the construct's biological barriers, they'll spread throughout its nervous system and disrupt its ability to coordinate with the fleet. Colonel Nenia Brooks raised an obvious concern. How do we deliver these microorganisms to the target? That construct is protected by the largest swarm fleet in the galaxy. We use the entire human fleet as a delivery system, Admiral Morrison announced. Every ship, every marine, every weapon we have will be focused on one goal, getting close enough to the bioconstruct to release the infection. The plan that emerged over the next 18 hours was the most ambitious military operation in human history. The entire fleet would charge directly at the bioconstruct, accepting massive casualties to punch through the swarm's defensive perimeter. Once they reached the target, specially modified boarding teams would penetrate the construct's biological barriers and release. Marcus's weaponized bacteria. Captain Steve Murphy would lead the ground assault with his Marine division. Steve had been studying the construct's defensive systems and believed that human boarding tactics could be adapted for use against such a massive target. We'll need to approach from multiple vectors simultaneously, Steve explained during the final planning session. The construct's immune system will try to concentrate its defenses, but if we hit it from dozens of different points at once, we can overwhelm its response capabilities. Dr. Sophie Barnes, Marcus's assistant, had been working on specialized delivery systems for the biological weapons. Sophie was young but brilliant, with degrees in both microbiology and military engineering. I've designed bacterial deployment pods that can be fired from standard torpedo tubes, Sophie reported. Each pod contains billions of engineered microorganisms in a protective matrix. Once they penetrate the construct's outer membrane, they'll begin replicating and spreading throughout its biological networks. The final element of the plan came from an unexpected source. Ambassador HFY had been studying human tactical methods and offered a crucial piece of information about swarm behavior. Admiral Morrison, there is something you should know about the bioconstruct, HFY announced during a private meeting. Our ancient records speak of similar creatures from previous swarm invasions. They possess a form of consciousness that is both collective and individual. What does that mean in practical terms? Jake asked. It means the construct can be reasoned with, HFY explained. Unlike the drone ships, the superorganism has the capacity for negotiation and compromise. If your assault succeeds in damaging its core systems, it might be willing to communicate. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of talking to a creature that had consumed entire civilizations was both fascinating and horrifying. But if it gave them an edge in the coming battle, he would use every advantage available. The human fleet began its final approach to the galactic core 18 hours later. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath and watched as 800 human ships prepared for the most desperate battle in their species' history. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast to the entire fleet. In a few hours, we're going to attempt something that every military expert in the galaxy would call impossible. We're going to charge directly into the largest enemy fleet ever assembled and destroy a target that has the accumulated power of thousands of extinct civilizations. He paused and looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared but determined, ready to risk everything for the survival of their species and their allies. I won't lie to you about our chances, Jake continued. Most of us probably won't survive this battle. But if we succeed, we'll save not just humanity and the Catherians, but every species in the galaxy that the swarm would have consumed in the future. The fleet accelerated toward the bioconstruct at maximum speed. Long-range sensors detected the massive swarm fleet beginning to move into defensive positions. 20,000 bioships arranged themselves in layers around there superorganism, creating overlapping fields of fire that seemed impenetrable. But the human fleet didn't slow down or spread out. They maintained their tight formation and kept accelerating, just as they had done at Kithro's prime. When the swarm opened fire at maximum range, human ships used their superior maneuverability to weave through the attacks while closing distance. Rapidly, the battle began in earnest when the two fleets collided at the outer perimeter of the bioconstruct's defenses. Human destroyers crashed into swarm formations at high speed, detonating nuclear charges and kinetic warheads. Larger human ships concentrated their fire on the biggest biovessels, trying to clear lanes for the boarding teams. Captain Rachel Turner led a squadron of assault ships directly toward the bioconstruct's surface. Rachel was Alex Turner's sister and an equally gifted tactical commander. Her mission was to punch through the construct's defensive membrane and create entry points for the Marine boarding teams. Target those neural clusters, Rachel ordered her gunners. We need to disrupt the construct's coordination abilities before the Marines go in. The assault ships fired concentrated bursts of quantum disruptors at the bioconstruct's surface. The massive organism writhed in pain as its outer defenses began to fail. Gaps appeared in its protective membrane, revealing the complex biological structures underneath. This is Colonel Brooks. Nina's voice crackled over the communication system. Beginning boarding operations now. Hundreds of Marine boarding pods launched from human ships throughout the battle zone. Each pod carried 12 Marines armed with biological weapons and specialized equipment for fighting inside living structures. They punched through the bioconstruct's membrane like bullets penetrating skin. Lieutenant Commander Paul Jenkins led the assault team tasked with reaching the construct's central consciousness node. Paul was a veteran of dozens of boarding actions, but nothing had prepared him for the interior of the superorganism. The corridors were lined with living tissue that pulsed with alien blood vessels. The walls showed scenes from the memories of extinct civilizations, cities burning, species fleeing in terror, entire worlds being consumed. The bioconstruct wasn't just storing information about its victims. It was preserving their final moments for eternity. This thing is a monument to genocide, Paul whispered to his team as they fought their way deeper into the construct. Every civilization the swarm has destroyed is trapped in here. The Marine teams encountered increasingly sophisticated defenses as they penetrated toward the construct's core.